The BIPOC Coach Collective proudly presents Elevate and Celebrate. This is a podcast to showcase our members, dive deeper into their journeys, and express who they are into the world. Our mission is to curate a brave and authentic space for coaches to connect and to elevate our voices globally in the coaching profession. Learn more about us at bipoccc.org. Your story matters, your voice matters. Let's start the show. Welcome to this month's episode, latest and greatest of Elevate and Celebrate. This is Alex Dumas, the Vice President of the BIPOC Coach Collective. And this month we are featuring a dear friend of mine, a powerful coach, a great enroller, a great leader. His name is Siwash Zahmat, and he's going to share with us his background from playing poker to almost having his marriage collapse years later, and just the work of what he's done, the way he's being, the way that we could step into our own superhero powers and make a big difference in the world. So tap in for this conversation. This is really one of those episodes that you're going to want to take notes. You're going to want to be in a place where you can slow down and really hear what's happening and learn from a world-class masterful coach like Siwash. And for those members in the collective, tap in, because this month's facilitation call is going to happen on the 17th. Dr. Norma Hollis is going to be sharing a framework for understanding authenticity. We're also going to have our open house, our free networking call that's open to the public, May 31st, that last Friday of the month. And we might have a special surprise this month too. So I'm not going to say too much about it right now. Just hush, hush. But tap in, enjoy this episode, and let's get this show started. All right, welcome to the latest and greatest episode of Elevate and Celebrate. And I'm blessed, I'm pleased, I'm thrilled, I'm excited to have a dear friend, a powerful coach, an amazing person I've been able to connect with in real life, in real time, not just in Zoom, but also in real life, as he attended the Ultimate Experience back in 2022. And usually I start these in a different way, but I think it demands this, for the kind of level of leader you are and for what you're going to be able to contribute to this episode. And Siwash, I want you to know that I acknowledge you for being an amazing husband, unbelievable father, and someone who I've paid attention to for these last several years, as we've been in different communities with Steve Chandler, Rich Liffin, all these different type of folks. And I just kind of, there's always this real anchored sense of like, I'm in control of myself. I see people, I value people, and just this really strong confidence, but it's not in your face. It's not, you're not screaming from the top. So I'm going to be the one that screams for you on this episode, because you're not going to say these great things about yourself, because that's the type of man you are. But I just acknowledge you for an amazing coach you are, and thank you and welcome to the show, Siwash Zahmat.
Thank you, man. Those words mean a lot. And yeah, I think, we work hard, in private to create what we see in public. So I appreciate acknowledgement, because there's a lot of work that's gone behind the scenes to get to where I am.
I think that's, before we get into that, I usually say this for the end. I want people to know, like, right off the bat, like, how do we connect with you? What's the best way that we can stay tapped into your world?
Yeah, the best way is, I think, Facebook, and Facebook, and me and my team are also going to focus more on LinkedIn, because we want to expand the service that we do. But yeah, like I try to share as generously as possible on those platforms.
Yeah, and I'll attest firsthand that that's the truth, because the posts you share, the information, the opportunities for people to transform working with you. I mean, the client results that you get for people. This is not a billboard for Siwash, right? So everybody's like, "Oh my God, Alex, like no." You need to understand who you're about to hear from and connect with. This is somebody whose clients are creating 5-figure months, 6-figure months, right? He's just somebody who not only is powerful at the skill of coaching, but the business side, the actual driver of things, creating a team and all these different things. So I know that it wasn't always the case, right? As every
Mm.
superhero, there is an origin story. So we talked so far about what you accomplished, and you said a great thing about these things done in private. These things are done when nobody's looking. So who is Sea-Watch when nobody's looking? Like, who is that guy?
Mm. Great question. Yeah, well, first of all, look, I started coaching around 7.5 years ago. Kind of fell into it accidentally, but before that, right? So this is like 2016. In 2008, my kind of personal growth journey started.
Mm.
So I was a professional poker player. I didn't hire a coach at that time, but I was reading a lot of books around how to improve my mindset because in in poker, right, there's a lot of money at stake. So I used to play I used to play the high stakes poker, so there's like tens of thousands on the table.
Okay.
Um yeah, so there's a lot going on and you need a lot of emotional regulation, you need a like a really strong mindset to be able to cope
Mm.
with that kind of game. So that's where the thing started. And then in 2006, I actually hired my first coach, right? I attended a lot of workshops with people like Tony Robbins. In 2016, sorry, not 2016, I hired my first coach. And that's why there's like a breakthrough that was there for me
Mm.
that I didn't see through all the books and all the workshops that I went through in those previous 8 years. Right? So behind the scenes, I've always, read books, tried to improve myself, tried to change my habits, right? I've always, it's interesting you talk about superheroes. I always bring that a lot of that into my work, and I love watching superhero movies, and I think we can take a lot of insights from that, take a lot of lessons from that,
Yeah.
right? I believe that every one of us actually has a superhero inside of us. And when we connect to that, the way I see it, but is that, you know, often when people look at, for example, Superman, they think Clark Kent is the normal guy and you know,
Yeah.
but actually Clark Kent is not the normal guy. Superman is the normal, Clark Kent is made up. And I believe that a lot of us go through life like that. We all have a Superman, but what we do is we show up as Clark Kent, and then Clark Kent becomes the normal guy, right?
Yeah.
And what happened for me is I saw glimpses of that Superman. I saw that in poker, and I saw that throughout my journey, and I realized like, okay, you know what? I need to, really slow down and put a lot of attention to getting this guy out, right? You know, for different reasons. I was holding back, so whether it was to look good or to avoid looking bad. And so a lot of my work privately through, I've had coaches by my side, for the last 7.5 years, one-on-one coaches, relationship coaches, and I've been doing therapy, one-on-one therapy for the last year and a half. And all these things has allowed me to almost take the layers of the onion off, right? And for me is to step into the real me, which is for me the Superman. And which is funny because now I wear glasses. I got prescription glasses, right? A lot of people don't know this. I've shared this with some clients. I wear prescription glasses now, but at the start of my journey, I just started wearing glasses because for me, putting glasses on was like stepping into Superman. Clark Kent actually put glasses on to become Clark Kent, right? Because Superman doesn't want to stand out, right? He wants to be the guy that's just the normal guy. So he puts those fake glasses on,
Mm.
right? He creates that Clark Kent.
Yeah.
And, sometimes we need certain triggers to step into that different personality. There's a great book and I think it's a great book for coaches called The Alter Ego Effect. It's not a book that's very well known. written by an incredible high performance coach, Todd Herman. Todd Herman worked directly with Kobe Bryant. He's the guy, and all of this was confidential until recently. He started sharing this after Kobe passed away.
Yeah.
But he worked with Kobe directly one-on-one and helped Kobe create the Black Mamba,
Yeesh.
right? And
Yeah.
that's where Kobe stepped into his higher self, right? And in his book, he talks about that sometimes we need certain triggers. So when I'm with the kids, I take my glasses off. I'm just like me, playful. When I'm coaching, I put my glasses on, right? So yeah, that's kind of behind the scenes. So I mean, we can talk hours about that. I love that part, but I think you see some of my books here. It's probably 300-400 books. For me, I've always just been focused on looking at different parts of my life and looking at where do I need to improve, right? Where
Yeah.
am I doing well? And these are three questions that I ask myself every single day, you know, and I also ask it after every single coaching session,
Mm.
right? Because I don't believe that mastery happens in a moment of like that. It doesn't happen. Yes, sometimes yes, transformation can happen in a moment, but mastery in coaching, I believe it's is a moment to moment thing. So after every single performance, every single conversation I have, I ask myself these three questions. What did I do well? What can I do better? And what did I learn? And
Mm.
every time I ask that, it shows me some things I'm doing well, so I can repeat that, but it also gives me an opportunity for a growth. And I'm just looking for that 1% growth,
Right.
right? And sometimes it shows me that there's a lot of growth in an area, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, continuous. I think like privately, there's those questions have allowed me to just see like where I can improve, where I can grow.
Yeah. That's wonderful, man. Thank you for sharing that. And as you were talking, a couple questions came into mind. One's gonna be really quick. This will probably be a simple one, but as you mentioned your poker background, I'm sure somebody out there is gonna want to know what's the largest bet you ever put down that you feel
Large
or you
bet.
want to share.
No, and I'm quite open about sharing. I think probably like the largest. I think in one day, um, I think it was, or the largest bet, the single bet probably was around like 15-20K.
Oof.
I remember one day where I lost around 30K, and losing by the way is always more painful. That like I've won 25,000 in one day, and it didn't feel like it felt amazing, but it didn't feel like you know the emotions were not that intense as losing.
There was no confetti, there was no balloons and all that, and cheerleaders and people just carrying you on their shoulders like you got 25. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, and I think here's the thing. Poker. One of the reasons I left it is because it still has an element of gambling,
Mm,
right? But the amazing thing is, at the end of I played 4 years. At the end of every month, I was winning, and it's because of that discipline that came into that. And I see a lot of similarities in the game of coaching and the game of business, right? There's
yeah.
some things that are unpredictable in a way, right? I read this yesterday, and I really could connect to that. I think in a way, business is a little bit like that. Business is a bit like gambling, right? And but the more we learn, and I want coaches really to listen to this because I felt like that in the beginning, right? I made like 50,000 pounds, so that's around like $60,000 in my first year as a coach,
Yeah.
but I had no clue what I was doing, right? It felt like going to the casino, right? And the thing is, the good news is that we can learn,
Yeah.
right? We can learn the different skills. We can get good at building relationships. We can get good at nurturing relationships. We can get good at sales and involvement, right? We can get really good at coaching so clients get better results and clients stay with us and talk about us in a positive way, right? So the better we get at it, the less and less it will become like gambling, and the more and more we
Yeah.
get control over things.
Yeah. As you were speaking that, mind my mind's going back to the superheroes. I don't know if you ever collected like the little cards, like the trading cards when you were a kid, right? And on the back of them, on the front it would be the picture of like Wolverine or the Hulk, somebody like that. And then you flip over and it had like their power ratings, like this much strength, this much agility, this much of whatever endurance, right? And what you just shared right there, I wonder if coaches really tapped into that of, man, where's my enrollment skills? Like, what level am I on that? Or how am I doing with like my consistency and the actual quality of people I'm connecting with? Because that's a big thing. That's something that held me back at the start. Was like, coach everybody, I want to work with everybody, and you start recognizing, not everybody's for me, and I'm not for everybody, and that's a beautiful thing too. So
Mm,
I'm curious about what would you say about discipline? How that has influenced your life, and actually what you gained from coaching? Like, how has discipline made you a better coach?
yeah. Um, I think that discipline, my relation with discipline has been really interesting because for a long time, I've always kind of been a rebel, right? I've come from a family where, my brother studied airplane, or he has a degree in airplane engineering, and another brother is like a doctor. And that was kind of my path, but then I was like, screw it, and I didn't go to university, right? Because I found that, what, don't get me wrong, I think education is really valuable and very important, but I didn't like that structure, like, being forced to work for someone else in a certain set of hours, being told what to do. So I always thought that, okay, you know what? I don't need discipline. My first few years, it's basically like, I don't need it. I want freedom. That's why I want to start my own business. But in the last few years, really, especially in the last 4 years, right? My first 2 years of being a coach was very messy. And I would basically classify myself like as an amateur coach. Made a good amount of money, but it was basically like I got freedom. I can live life on my terms. I can work when I want, whatever, right?
Right.
And while that's nice, it actually works against you. And I've read quite a few books on discipline, really studied discipline, and I really believe that discipline creates freedom, right? So a lot of times as entrepreneurs, we kind of want to go against that, right? But here's the thing, discipline doesn't need to limit you. It actually can allow you to create more flow, more freedom. And I'll give you a simple example of that, right? Like I start seeing that, okay, you know what? I don't want to be like in a 9 to 5 job, but if I have a starting time for my work and an end time within that time, and this will allow me also to grow in other areas, like, for example, fitness and health. It allowed me to grow in my relation with my wife because I can block out time for that. I can, I got two little kids, so I can create time for them, right? When I didn't do that, it was just I was working like, you know, 11 to 9 p.m., right? Because I would sleep 2 a.m. So I was like, I got freedom. I can stay up all night, wake up late, start work late, and finish late, right? And I had this kind of idea, this misunderstanding, and I think a lot of people have this misunderstanding that entrepreneurship need to be 9 to 9. I don't really believe that. And
Mm,
I've helped a lot of coaches create a structure where, and within that structure, I've seen them flourish. I've seen them create businesses that, and it's not just about the numbers, but just to give you an idea, right? Like 100K, 250K, 300K a year,
mm,
but within a constrained structure, right? So here's the thing, right? Constraints creates more creativity, because when we are constrained, right, this limitation forces us to think outside of the box. So if I know, like right now, my structure, and I'm in a kind of season of life where I need to support my wife more because of her health, but my work is 9 to 3, and I never would think that would be possible for me. But it's forced me to think really creatively. It's forced me to think outside of the box. And so within that time period, I'm actually creating more impact, more income than previously in a 9 to 9. I was working all hours, but there was less focus, there's less intensity,
Mm.
right? And it also forced me to, so as we grow our skills. By the way, I love what you said about the card. I recently did this with a client, right? It's a great way to audit where we are, right? So as we grow our skills, right, we create more leverage, because in that same hour, for example, you can get paid $100, or you can get paid $1,000. But as your skills grow, you become a better coach, people will pay you more,
Yeah.
right? So yeah, discipline is at the core of that, because I hear this all the time from coaches, right? And not just coaches, I also work, for example, with a CEO, and I have a group for men that are not coaches. And I hear this all the time. You know what? Like, I want to read. I know reading is important, but I can't find the time, or I'm trying to read in the evening, right? And so this discipline, this structure allows us to just do the important things,
Right.
right? And I think what we all want deeply, like, is freedom, right? So if you want freedom, you know, develop discipline, and put it, create that structure, because it's gonna really give you that freedom.
Yeah. Yeah. Structure creates freedom. And it's such a paradox, right? Because, just like you shared, right? You thought 2 a.m., ooh, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm a leader, I'm in business, kind of show up when you want and work yourself to the bone. As entrepreneurs, we're often the worst bosses in our lives. We will drive us to the ground and keep coming back for more. But that's interesting to think about. I'm just tying all these different things in, right? With collapsing your time, right? More focus, more intensity, and relating it back to your background in poker, where now you've essentially bet on yourself, right? You're hedging all of this because there's less of me available, but I'm better at what I do, right? Sometimes I think that can get in the way of leaders and coaches of thinking, wow, the more that I'm available, the more time I have, they can reach me at any time. That makes you better, but actually, high performing, high achieving clients, they really value that scarcity, that limitation of like, oh, I only have them for this window. They're showing up in a different way. If I know I have an hour with Siwash, if I have 10 minutes, I'm coming prepared with the best questions. I'm coming prepared with less distraction in my mind. I'm not showing up there late, eating a donut, right? Just kind of cleaning up like it's real preparation. It's real focus. I think that's the key for not only for us as coaches, but to create to help our clients see what they can do for themselves.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And as you were talking, I wrote something down. I think is, look, skills are very important,
Yeah.
right? And I love this. I think it's Angela Duckworth. She wrote a great book called Grit, and she has this formula in the book. It's talent multiplied with effort
Mm.
gives you skills. Skills multiplied with effort gives you results,
Ooh.
right? So we got effort twice. Effort is really important. I think this one of the mistakes I think I made, and I see a lot of times, is that we think that it's all about smart work, it's not about hard work. And because of that, sometimes we almost like take hard work out of the equation.
Yeah. You need both.
Yeah. And by the way, I remember just studying successful entrepreneurs, successful business, successful coaches, and just seeing again and again, hard work comes up,
Yeah.
right? And so that's another thing from me going from amateur to professional, is working harder, right? But the thing that I wrote down here on paper is that while skills are important, if we would have this player card,
Hmm.
right, right, just skills is not gonna get you. It will get you only to a certain point. Like, you can become good at coaching, you can become good at sales, marketing, what the other things is who you're being,
Yeah.
right? And I know there's, a lot of, there's now a whole kind of movement around that. Even that, right? For me, when I think about that, there's a bunch of things that come up. Words like focus.
Yeah.
How focused are you? How disciplined are you? How loving are you? Like, right, against yourself, against others, right? But it's though there are things that we can write down, right? How much risk do you take? You
Oof.
know, how much, in all these things, if again, research what are the most successful traits of successful entrepreneurs and successful coaches, you find a bunch of them that come up again and again and again and again, right? And so we also want to develop those things. We talked about ordering food in, sleeping late. One of the things I shifted is around like, okay, if I'm going to be right,
Mhm.
um, I'll give an exercise that I think will be really useful for anyone that's listening. My coach at the end of my first year, he asked me, okay, what's your dream kind of business in 5 years? I said, 5 clients paying me 50K,
Mm.
right? And at that time, I think that at the most somebody paid me like 5K. So it's like almost like 10 times more,
Yeah.
right? And for 1 hour, he just asked me like, okay, he said, who do you need to be as a, 50K coach? I didn't know anything. I'm like, I don't know. Like, I need to be disciplined, right? He's like, okay. And he's like, how would you dress? I was
Mm.
like, okay, I probably need to be dressed. He's like, how would you read books? How would you prepare for sessions,
Mm.
right? How would you communicate to your clients? How would you, and then he went beyond that. And this is why when people really listen to. So one part is the coaching part. How present would you be? What kind of questions would you ask? Would you ask the uncomfortable, challenging questions? So yeah, if somebody pays me 50K, they probably want me to say the things that no one else is willing to say. But then he went to the other part. He said, how would you eat?
Mm.
Right? What kind of food would you eat in the morning and afternoon if you know you have clients paying you 50K? So
Mm.
what would your morning routine be? And then he went throughout my day, right? Like how would your morning look like, evening? And I start seeing on that piece of paper, I start seeing like, okay, this is who I am or who I would be as a 50K coach,
Right.
and this is who I am now. And there's this big gap. And he said, your job is every day to show up as this person, right? And just like keep showing up as that person. Ask yourself, right? Like somebody sends you an email, how would I respond if this was my 50K client or if I was a 50K coach? And that's where the big shift happened because I realized, you know what, 50K coach wouldn't eat, uh, like a lot of food during the afternoon and be sleepy during the session, right?
Yeah.
Like I can get away with that if someone is paying me a little bit of money, right? But these are just some things that came up for me. I'm not saying all these things are good or bad, but that's where the shift happened for me. It's like, okay, if someone pays me that much money, I'm gonna go to bed early so I'm fully rested. I'm gonna be going to the gym so I have more energy.
Yeah.
That I think that part, that for me is the who you're being part because it 50K is for me like, okay, now I'm more like a professional athlete. I'm not just like a casual guy that's working out or running. I'm like the professional athlete
Yeah.
that's eating well, sleeping well. And I start putting more and more attention here, right? And that's where a lot of the big shift starts happening. I think like because we can improve, gradually, which is always important. And then there can be some exponential growth. And that comes really from asking the bigger question, right? Going into the future and bringing that guy or girl into the now, right?
Mhm.
So yeah, that was kind of like that's just came up for me. I think those are the things that made that, you know, the big shifts. And right, when people like you might get overwhelmed thinking about that, bringing all of that here, but I'm just bringing it little by little. So if I'm thinking like, okay, well, that guy would sleep at 10 p.m., I'm sleeping at 2, I'm just gonna like gradually bring it down.
Right.
I'm not gonna judge myself like, look at me. I'm just like, I'm not gonna shame myself because that's not useful.
Right. That's a key ingredient, right? The forgiveness part of it of, hey, I'm not there yet. I'm not I but at least you have a path. You see something, right? And I think for a lot of people they have the challenge of this is how it is, this is how it's always gonna be. I can't do anything about it. And what I'm hearing you recommend and you know share with us to possibly for hopefully you listening, you watching will integrate this of really getting detail, really getting clear of this is what 100K coach should 200K, whatever your number is. It's your number. What does that person do? What do they look like? Our mutual coach right now in this cohort that we're a part of, his words ring in my head all the time. It's just be that guy, right? Be the superhero, right? Clark Kent's a nice guy, but people have come for the cape. Step out the phone booth, tear the shirt, let's go. That's what I'm hearing from this.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, and you know, we can be playful,
Yeah,
and when we tap into that playfulness, actually we connect to our higher self. You see, that 5 year, that guy, I created him. But here's the fun part. And again, look, sometimes money is just the number is a measurement, right?
yeah.
But I got that 50K client 2 years from that doing that exercise, not 5 years, right?
Yeah.
And I think it was 3 years in, I got the first 100K client.
Mm,
And here's the thing, the compliment, because I used to think like it's all just because of my business skills and knowledge, but the compliment I got is like, no, it's because of who you're being and your coaching, right? And that was the part for me, right? The fun part also, by the way, which is hard for me because I'm very competitive and I love achieving numbers and hitting numbers.
yeah.
I shifted my focus from money to just mastery. And
Mm,
by the way, like the reason I shifted it is because of something that Steve Chandler taught me. And it's again, it's a paradox, right? And for me, that was kind of like putting trust in my coach at that time is that if you want to earn a lot of money, you want a lot of clients, you want to help a lot of people, shift your focus away from the money and the clients, shift your focus on becoming really great at what you do
mm,
and helping a lot of people, right?
yeah.
We all want money and clients, but if we just go focus on that, it's almost like chasing a butterfly,
Yeah.
and it's harder. You attract that by the person you become, right? So I'm not saying I stopped wanting that. You can still desire that. I had a commitment towards a certain goal, but I'm like letting go of the outcome because that outcome is not in my control or your control,
Yeah.
right? What is in our control is how good we become. And that's fun because that game we can all play. And there's no pressure to get to a certain point, right? It's just I love sports. It's just like, for example, playing basketball,
Mm,
right? If you keep throwing enough 3 pointers, you get good at it. And then you have maybe a coach that can give you a little bit of guidance on standing a little bit different, holding the ball a bit different.
right.
And then, you practice something else. And maybe you want to practice, dribbling. It's just that, right? And that's why I think like one of the key things for us is patience. Next to discipline is the patience. If you give yourself enough time, you can become great at this.
Wow. I hope you watching, listening are going to rewind that because that was gold. We're talking about practice, right? And what you shared a few minutes before that was this opportunity of a formula for practice. I'm going to practice going to sleep as a 50K coach. I'm going to practice working out as a 50K coach. I'm going to practice every day eating like a 50K coach. And to bring it back to sports, I saw this little reel, this Instagram reel of Gilbert Arenas. He's a former NBA player, and he was talking about shots like you were, right? There are gonna be some games that it's his point was it's rare to see somebody say make 20 out of 20 shots in a game, right? That's like a rare feat. I mean, I don't think that's happened that high yet. It's been like 15, 17 shots, whatever, it doesn't matter. But to have a perfect game, okay, wow, that's a rare thing. And then also on the flip side, to have a game where you don't hit any shots, you're 0 for 20. That's not a great game. But somewhere in between, you're gonna make 10 shots here. You're gonna make 3 shots one day. You're gonna make 7 shots. You're gonna make 12. So knowing that you could take the emotional charge out of what I do or what I make, as long as if you're on the field, if you're on the court taking shots, you're already far ahead of probably 90% of 95% of people out there. Um, Man, I had
Yeah.
a really great question to ask you, but this has been such a great conversation. Now it's fallen out of my head, which is fine. Um, I just
Yeah.
I think what I said.
Well,
Yeah, go.
yeah, something came up for me as you're talking about practice, right? Look, one of the things that makes it a bit harder for us is because we don't usually have a roadmap, right? So
Right.
when you go to, for example, if you want to become a dentist, you go to, right, study a dentist degree, and
Right.
there's a roadmap, like it's 4 years, and they take you to a process,
Yes.
right? And this is one of the things I've been working on for myself, but also actively with other coaches, is
Hmm.
creating a bit more clarity,
Mm.
right? As human beings, I feel like we need that, right? And like I started last year in May, I started jiu-jitsu, Brazilian jiu-jitsu. So it's a martial arts, and I'm a white belt, right?
Yeah.
And this got me really to think, like, hey, if as coaches, we all start at white belt,
Yeah.
and then there's some skills that we need to learn that can take us to blue belt. The great thing as a coach is it's a profession like being a doctor. But the great thing is we don't need to study 6 years and then work and get paid. We get paid while we're working, while we're learning, we get paid,
Yeah.
right? And of course, it comes with a responsibility, right, towards every client we work with. But this is the great thing is, you know, we can get paid while we're working, while we're learning. But I think that's the important part, just to see like, hey, you know what? Where am I at the moment? If I love the example you gave, of the number of shots.
Yeah.
You might have 10 sales calls, and maybe one person signs up. That's okay. You got now 1 out of 10. Now
Right.
you can just with each one of them, you can analyze it, right? What went well? What did by the way, these 3 questions I learned from a guy that finished bronze in Olympics. I think it's like I think it was archery or another sport, but he finished bronze. He was really upset. He's
Right.
like, in 4 years, I'm gonna win gold. In 4 years, I'm gonna win gold. 4 years, every time he practiced, he asked these 3 questions, and then in 4 years, he won the gold medal,
Wow.
right? Because what it does, it allows us to improve it. Because here's the thing: some people play the numbers game. Numbers are important. Any business numbers are important.
Yes.
But if you just only play the numbers game, you're gonna struggle because you're like, oh, I need to get my next 10 people to get my next one client, right? If you also keep improving, that number will go from 1 to 2, from 2 to 3,
Yeah.
right? And here's the amazing part. You get good at this, it's the same game, but the game doesn't change at different prices. Once I got good at this around like 5K, 10K, the game didn't change with clients that pay 25K, 50K, 100K. The
Yeah.
game is the same. There's some little things change, of course, in terms of the stakes, but the game is the same, right? And what we need is yes, we need to study kind of involvement sales, especially ideally with someone that has that experience in the coaching world. We need that feedback loop. We need so practice, but then we need to ask those 3 questions. Because I think, one of the misunderstanding is like, oh, if I just do enough practice, like, if I do my 10,000 hours, I get to mastery. We need to like practice, get feedback from a coach, from a
Yeah.
mentor, from someone. right? And also we can get the feedback ourselves by asking those questions. Yeah, so that's gonna take us from white belt to blue belt. And honestly, I think like, even black belt is not the end, right? In martial arts, like in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, I think there's like levels of black belt. Like if you're black belt and you teach for 10 years, then you get another color or like another stripe. So there's so many levels to this game,
Have
right?
you ever heard the difference between a white belt and a black belt? Do you know what the difference is?
Now tell me.
A black belt is just a white belt that never gave up.
I love that.
So shout
Yeah.
out to my man Raj for giving me that one at an event that we at Transcendence last year in July. I never heard that before until then.
Yeah.
I was like, wow, yeah. If you are a master student, if you are a master, you're always mastering being a student.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think Steve said it in a different way, but similar is if you just stay on the path,
Yeah,
you'll get there,
yeah.
and I think it's just giving ourselves the time because we set these unrealistic expectations like 1 year I need to get to 100K and then we don't get there and we're
Better
like maybe
happen.
maybe yeah. I think that there's a distinction that's really helped me and a lot of the coaches I work with is called shame versus game.
Mm,
So we talk a lot about game, right? We talk about the game of we can turn coaching and business in a game, similar to basketball, similar to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. But in this game, we need to like not take things personal. If somebody doesn't sign up, I could say, well, maybe there's something wrong with me, maybe I'm not good enough. Or
right,
I could just like ask myself those questions, like what can I improve? What did I do well? And so if when we shame ourselves, it lowers our self-esteem, right? It lowers our professional self-esteem,
yeah,
right? And even if somebody says something that is hurtful, we can still look at it and like, okay, what about that is true? What can I learn from that?
mm,
I mean, I've had times where, in especially my early years, I've had times where somebody said something really hurtful, and I took it to my coach. I'm like, maybe this is not for me, this career. He's like, no, actually, from what I'm hearing from you, you did a good job, but it was just the outcome wasn't good. So let's look at what we can learn from this. Right? I think that's a big thing, like I I don't know who this was. I think it was Steve Chandler. He said like if you would have a clinic for coaches with, with self-esteem problems, you would have like a big line with people waiting outside because this is what we do. We're always
right,
looking at like maybe I'm not good enough,
yeah,
right? Maybe, and while there's some value, of course, in always looking at ourselves, well, there's some value in that self-awareness and self-reflection. We
right,
want to like shift our focus more towards like, hey, you know, as a professional, what can I do? What did I do well? What can I improve?
right. That's super valuable right there. Man, the question that I had earlier, it's finally returned to me because I think I wanted to touch on this because you mentioned earlier about being somewhat of a rebel, somewhat of this outlier within your construct of your culture, your community. And I just wanted you to kind of touch on really quickly the work you do with Muslim men because I think that's important. I think that's something that needs to be expressed because from what I understand, right, that's not something men don't really, and maybe that's even an American or just a worldwide kind of stigma thing, right? Like, men are alone, lone wolves, and
Mm,
we are in community. It is healthy, but there's a version, right, of like this resistance to just openly saying like, hey, I need to be with other men, other brothers to support me and serve me. So can you just speak on that work that you do a little bit?
yeah. Um, yeah, look, I've done a lot of work on myself, and then it's only 2 years ago that for the first time I joined a men's group,
Mm.
right? And even that was kind of by accident because I hired a guy 101 and he was running a men's group. So he's like, look, you're paying me a lot of money. Like I don't know, paying him like 40K. And he's like, look, I run this men's group and I think it would be really valuable for you. Are you committed to showing up? And that's like a 12K 1 year group,
Yeah.
right? So I did that and then I renewed in that program. So I was in that program 2 years and I started seeing very different things because for me, I was growing myself, right? But it was like growing myself as a coach, as a human being. But
Yeah.
that part of me growing myself as a man was almost like separate, right? And I can't really explain it and maybe like give some examples, right? But just by being in that container, in that safe space with guys.
Yeah.
And initially I was just really showing up like I was playing safe. I wasn't like sharing everything, but guys are sharing like, hey, you know what? I thought I have this great relationship and my wife just put the divorce papers on the table. Or someone else shared like, oh, I haven't been sleeping with my wife for a year. And people start sharing different things and different struggles and about addictions and porn addictions and all that kind of stuff. And I'm listening, I'm like, wow, we all have so much in common,
Yeah.
right? So for me, I experienced a different level of transformation within that group, right?
Yeah.
And usually before I do anything, I like to walk the path, right? Before I start working with coaches for years, I built my own business and really went through that struggle and the growth in that area, right? And so I went through a big transformation there, and I'm still, I think, going through a transformation there as a man, right? And
Yeah.
I start seeing that just in one, I start seeing that while we have more and more men's group, I don't think we have enough. And everywhere I go, 80 to 85% of people that are coming to these programs, whether it's business programs, personal programs, they're women. And I think that's great because, I have a sister, my wife, I want women to grow. But I've
Yeah.
always seen like why don't we have more men? And I think part of that is right, this I think as men often we have this idea that asking for help is a form of weakness,
Yeah.
right? So in my work, yeah, like I was doing some one-on-one work with guys, and then I thought, you know what, I want to create a group, I want to bring men together because one-on-one work, it was powerful, but I had this idea like, hey, when they're in a group, they're gonna get a different level of growth because they can see that they're not the only one that's going through this stuff,
Mm.
right? So I created this group, and yeah, the work that I do in the group, it's for focus around like I call it the big four. It's around improving love, improving energy, improving work, and improving spirituality. And those all areas of life fall under those four categories. So under love is like your relationship with yourself, relationship with your partner, relationship with your kids. But then what we do is we put a microscope on each area, right? So get these guys to put some goals. What do you want? Yeah, we get them clarity on what they want.
Yeah.
And then we put a microscope under like, where are you now? And I think this is an important thing is right. This is one of the skills that when we get this as a coach, our work goes to the next level because it's not just about how good you are at getting people somewhere. You need to understand where someone is, right? And I think that's one of the reasons often people don't get what they want in life because they're not clear about where they are, right? So we go really deep, put a microscope under that, and just create a lot of safety around exploring like where are you really right now and what is really holding you back? Because, you know, like I said earlier in that conversation, at the start of the conversation, we all have a superhero, but sometimes we walk with kryptonite in our pocket, and we're walking. Like imagine Superman walking with kryptonite. He's just gonna be weak. The
Yeah.
bullet will go through him. He's not gonna. He's not gonna like be Superman,
Yeah.
right? So we have this. I mean, I work with one guy, and he paid me a lot of money, and we work in 3, 4 months, and every time like he shows up in the sessions, great, asking questions, but he's not doing any of the work. And in 3 months, I just said, hey, look, You know, your behavior is not in alignment with what you're saying. There's something
Mm.
else here. And it's just after 3 months, he felt safe enough to say, you know what, I got a porn addiction. It's taking over my whole life, right? And that's what I mean with the kryptonite. It's sometimes we're going through life, we have all this talent, we know we have the knowledge, but we're not getting to where we want because we have something that's holding us back. And so for me, it's just creating a safe space for guys, right, to just really find out, like, what is that thing that's holding you back, right?
Yeah.
And it works two ways. I believe that there's some things that we have right now that are holding us back. And I think then also what really separates often the successful entrepreneurs and people that create a lot of success in life is also we look ahead. What are some obstacles that can come in our way as we grow, right? Because
What if this
yeah, you can make a
happens?
lot of yeah, yeah, exactly. Because and that's I think such an important thing because you don't want to have the $1 million business and then get a divorce, get some papers on the table because your wife's like, look, 3 years, I felt I wasn't seen. I wasn't there for you. Like you didn't even look at me, right? And by the way, this happened to me around 4 or 5 years ago. I didn't get the divorce papers. I'm really thankful we're still together. But my
Yeah.
wife said, if something doesn't change, I'm leaving. And that was a wake-up call for me. I was like, what? Like I'm creating so much success here. She's like, well, but this relationship feels like it's non-existent,
Wow.
right? So it's just that, look, these things will happen to all of us. I think we can avoid some of these big mistakes by looking ahead and seeing what could happen, right? What could happen if I pursue this goal? And sometimes what we can do is, well, if I don't want this to happen, how can I create some guardrails, right? So for example, if I want to make sure that I'm best friends with my kids, well, part of my guardrails is 3 p.m. I have a stop. I'm going to pick them up from school. I'm going to be present with them. If
Yes.
I have some extra work, I can do that at 7 after they're sleeping. I'm going to be present in the weekends with them, right? So if we don't have that and somebody knocks on our door and says, hey, I'm going to pay you this much money. I need you at the weekends. You're like, cool, let's go. Let's do it,
Yeah.
right? But we don't see the cost. So we have to really be clear. And one way we can do this, right, by asking, what do I really want? What is the price I'm willing to pay for this?
Mm.
And also what's really useful, what's the price I'm not willing to pay for this? Because look, here, there's always a price.
Yeah.
A price is hard work.
Yeah.
But a price I'm not willing to pay is I'm not willing to sacrifice my health. Not again. Like I've had that. I've been to a burnout where everything on the health side stopped because I was like, well, it's more valuable to work an extra hour than go an hour to the gym,
Right.
right? But now I can see that, okay, no, I'm not willing to sacrifice that. I'm not willing to sacrifice, my religious practices. So what price are you willing to pay for it? And it's being very clear because you have to pay the price, right? And I think that's what makes the difference between the world-class performer and the middle class, right? And there's no judgment, by the way, around this. I was that guy for a very long time, but the middle class has big dreams, but is not willing to pay the price for it. The world class, they know that to achieve this, right, they need to adhere to certain practices, certain habits and rituals and routines. And of course, we can do that. So the hard work, we can do that. And at the same time, we can protect the areas that are important to us. The relationship with the wife,
Yeah.
is the health, right? But it's really, and this is such an interesting game, right? It's like you have to pay the price, but then you can choose. And that's the important part, right? It's like we're gonna
Yeah.
step into the being the owner. We don't need to be a victim. Like you choose what parts what price am I willing to pay and what price am I not willing to pay. If you're not willing to, work really hard for it, then okay, just maybe small, make the goal a bit smaller, or increase the timeline, because you can
Right.
achieve the $1 million business, but it might take you 10 years or 20 years, and that's okay, right? Because there's nobody else put those timelines on you.
What I hear from that is coming back to your poker days, right? Revisiting all the chips on the table, all in, because it's going to take everything you got to get everything you want. And I know we're a little
Mm,
right now. I would love to just, if you mind sharing this about your challenges with your wife, because I think it would be helpful for someone out there. Like, what was that shift for you? What did it look like to go from a Clark Kent as a dad, even though or as a husband, but being Superman in business, and then recognizing, oh, Superman's got to be everywhere, right? I think we kind of talked about that in the beginning, where like I put the glasses on or when I'm off, but like, what if the glasses just stay off all the time? What if you could just be Superman everywhere you go? That's your standard of excellence. That's your standard way of being.
yes, I love that question. Yeah. So when things almost fell apart,
Yeah,
I was only intentional in one part of my life, which is kind of the work.
yeah,
If work just if I make enough money, I can sort out everything else, right? Here's the way we shifted. And easy exercise to use for yourself, and I think that's an incredible exercise to use with clients. So when you have these four big areas of life, right? So energy, work, love, spirituality. And again, if spirituality doesn't speak to you, you can even remove that. So
yeah,
some clients I do that energy, work, love is with each of these areas, I get the first question is, what is your goal? The second is, who do you need to be?
mm,
And so with that, who do you need to be? Like I help the clients create an identity intentionally for all those areas. So what shifted for me, right? And by the way, it didn't magically shift. I started looking for coaches and I was like, okay, the coaches I have right now, they're so
yeah,
focused on growing a business, like 7, 8 figures, right?
yeah,
These guys were making a lot of money. I said, okay, I need to look at someone that's actually growing is the husband that I want to be, has the kind
mm,
of energy that I want to be,
yeah,
right? So I started looking for different types of coaches that could support me on that side, right? And when I found that, that's when I'm like, okay, now I get it. And I learned this exercise from a guy called Brian Johnson, incredible guy.
yeah,
Um, and it's creating, we talked about creating the Superman identity. Now I created an identity very intentionally for all four areas. So for example, who am I? Who do I want to be with my wife? Right? Who do I want to be with my kids? And they're different, a little bit different. Some of them, there's an overlap in all of them, right? But there's also slight differences.
yeah,
So for example, I'm playful, I'm present, and I'm fun with the kids. And we some of these words, they came from what I also saw was missing. So from with my wife, it's playful, present, non-judgmental,
yeah,
right? Because I would see like, hey, I bring certain elements in my work as a coach, but I'm not bringing this into my relationship with my wife,
mm,
right? And so 2 years ago, I had, a 2-hour session with Steve Hardison, right? The ultimate coach.
yeah,
And we spent 2 hours focusing on my relationship with my wife. And this is what I really got from him. It's like, he said something like this, right? Like if you bring who you're being as a coach into your relationship's going to transform. And as a result of that, your coaching will transform. And I really got that because, in a way, we are client number one. And I'm not saying this is the truth, but we can see this as a possibility, right? That we are client number one. And client number two, but the most important client is you. Second most important client is your partner.
yeah,
And that's when I start seeing like, wow, right? I'm so present and loving, and I hold this high standard for my clients, but I'm not even doing a fraction of that in my relationship. right? So that's why I get really intentional, like who do I need to be in this area, right? So getting very clear on those four areas, like what is the identity? But then underneath the identity, I always look at like what do I not, what's one thing I need to start doing? So I'm taking the identity now from the being to the doing, and what's one thing I need to stop doing, right? Start and stop, stop.
Yeah.
Because when we do those things, we the start, it allows us to step into the identity, right?
Yeah.
And then the stop also like allows us to remove some of those kryptonites, right? Okay, well, if this phone is getting in my way of me being present with my wife, that phone needs to be out of the room. And maybe there's some research shows this, right? That, when the phone is there, it
Yeah.
takes a little bit of your presence away, right? And I noticed actually from my wife that she said to me that when I see your phone, right, I just feel you're not that present with me, even though you might feel like you're fully present,
Right.
right? So yeah, so that's what really helped me is just that, and underneath that really is like, you want to grow anything in life, time and attention. Time and attention is the secret to becoming good at anything. So I'm like, okay, you know what? I spent so much money, so much time to grow myself professionally, but I've not even done like 1% of that here. So I'm like, okay, let's read. Like, I'm gonna study. Let's find the 5, 10 best books on marriage and becoming a great husband. And I'm start studying them. And I'm seeing like, okay, let's put this into practice. Study, put into practice. With my coach at that time, the one-on-one coach, I'm like, hey, the next 12 months, I just want to focus on becoming a great husband.
Wow.
And he said something to me. I didn't believe it at that time, right? I thought he's just pretending to be nice. He said, I'm really happy. And he said, I can promise you, you make more money by doing that. And that was not my focus, but he knew I was very driven also like wanting to achieve more, right? I
Right.
thought I need to probably my business is gonna slow down. He said if you actually focus on being a better husband, and by the way, if women are listening, if you focus on being a better partner, being a better wife, right? It's same, and you focus on having better health, right? As a byproduct, you will make more money. And I can see that because as a coach, you're more happy. You're more like, you get more creative ideas when your life is in more balance, right? So that really helped me. It's just putting more time and attention. And I think this is like a continuous work, right? It's like it's a mountain with no one mountain with no top.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, I could talk about so many nitty-gritty things. I don't know if that would be useful for people, but the idea is that I just start looking at, okay, and that's what Steve Hardison opened my eyes to, right? He would just, for example, say like he would just, you know, um, and I get permission to share some of these things, not everything, but
Okay.
right, I'm not gonna share some of the details, but for example, he would say, he would ask his wife, like, how well did I listen to you?
Mm.
Like, when is the I was like, I've never done that,
Wow.
right? Remember what I said earlier? Every single coaching session for 7.5 years, I've been writing down what did I do well, what can I improve. And as I start doing this more in my relationship, I start seeing opportunities for growth. I start seeing blind spots.
Yeah.
And then I did the hard question. And I get every single guy I work with to do this, right? It's uncomfortable, but I get them to ask. And I did the same is I asked my wife, on a scale of 1 to 10, how loved do you feel in this relationship at this moment? And I
Ooh.
thought it's a 7. She gave me a 2. And I think the first time she did it, right, she broke down. I was in tears.
Yeah.
And I just asked her the second question, like, how can I make this better? How can I make this an 8? And she gave me a list of things. And some of them I was like, wow, it's so easy. And I've just not seen that, right? But that's like gave me a lot to work with, right? And so for those of you that want to put this into practice, ask that question. On a scale of 1 to 10, how loved do you feel? You can ask your partner this, and if they might give you a 3, a 4. It's not so much about the number, right? But it's about we want to find out what does that number mean. Well, it's a 4 because I feel you're not present with me, or I feel I'm not getting your attention, or I feel you're not listening to me. And what would an 8 look like? Well, this is how an 8 would look like.
Wow. Man, that's the mic drop right there. Siwash, thank you, brother. Thank you for these for sharing these stories, right? Very vulnerable, personable for you, and also the the practical ways that we can apply this, because that's what I see as has been the thing that has changed my life the most with coaching. Not just having these insights, not just having distinction shared with me, but now being able to put it into practice, and that's what it always boils down to,
Yeah,
practice. So thank you for your contribution for our community, our collective, man. This has been incredible. We could have gone on for like 3 more hours, honestly, because there's so much, there's so much there, brother. So thank you.
yeah, yeah. No, it's my pleasure. And what I would invite the listener, right, or if someone is watching this, to just sit down and write down what are your insights, right? Like, what is my biggest insight from listening to this? But I love what you said there. That's like level one. You need to nurture that insight, put it into practice. That's where transformation happens,
Yeah,
right? So you can read all the books in the world. If you don't put it into practice, the shift is not going to happen. Or sometimes a shift will happen, but we need to nurture that. Like, we need to like work with that.
yeah,
So that's really where transformation happens. And that's why our work as coaches is so important. And that's why, what you're doing, and this group is doing is so incredible, because we need to all support each other, and the work we do is so important. I think sometimes I hear this like, oh, are there not, too many coaches? I think that's not enough, especially not enough, you know, the entry level is easy, right? But there's not enough at a higher level, really committed to creating, that big impact in people's life, and committed to creating an incredible life for themselves.
yeah, yeah. We can have a whatever 3 hours just talking about commitment, man. But I'm wishing you continued success, continued blessings for you and your family, man. I love the work that you've done on yourself so far and what you're going to continue to do and the impact you're going to make in the world. So it's always appreciated, man. Thank you for being a great example.
Thank you. Thank you. And yeah, I look forward to reading the comments and seeing what people get from this. If even one person benefits from this, I'm happy.
Beautiful, man. Until next time, y'all. See you next month. Stay blessed. Thanks for watching this episode. If you got value from this, please subscribe and leave a rating and review. And feel free to connect with us at bipoccc.org. See you next time.